This is Gary Vider. He's you might know him from America's Got Talent, Conan, The Late Show, and his podcast was, or I mean, his YouTube comedy special, It Could Be Worse, was just came out on YouTube this year. And then we're having you on for your limited series podcast, Number One Dad, which
Thanks, guys.
which congrats. It's top 100, right? On
Yeah, it goes in. So every Monday, a new
Mhm.
episode comes out. So it goes back and forth in. So you get the most amount of downloads on Monday, but it's doing well. It's
That's
doing
awesome.
well, and it's new. So 8 episodes are out now. There's going to be two more episodes coming. And yeah, if you haven't tuned in, it's a crazy story about me and my dad. My dad was a con man, and we stopped talking 24 years ago. And the path of the podcast, it just like follows me on this journey of like trying to track him down, learn more about him, why he made some of the decisions he made.
No, me and Cassandra have like devoured it. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Hi. I absolutely love your podcast so much. I can't wait for the next ones to come out. I just straight up
Thanks.
binged it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think also so it's a different model than some of other podcasts that might be like serial where they might just like drop all the episodes at once. So for whatever reason, it's under iHeart's model, so they just were like, let's just release one weekly. But yeah, so it's it might get another like nice real like big boost once all like the episodes are
Mhm.
out for binging.
Are you currently working on it, or have you wrapped
Oh,
producing?
so like every recording's done. What you work on now is just you could still listen to you have like basically like 5 days before it comes out, up until 5 days before it comes out, where you could just kind of finally tune anything, be like, oh, maybe there's another gap here that you could add in, or like some pause or some music. So a little tinkering that you could still do.
I
Yeah.
was curious because like on one of the episodes you were telling the date. You were like, it's March something
Yeah.
2022. So I
25th,
was like,
yeah.
oh, have you been like how like is this like 2 years in the making kind of thing?
Yeah,
Or
for sure. I mean, even longer, probably like I would say a little under 3 years, because from the time when I pitched it to the time when it like finally got made, and then when it got made, I was kind of in this position where the goal was to track down my father, but I didn't want to find him too soon in it, or I didn't want him to find out that I was doing it before I was ready to talk to him, because you kind of want that like spontaneity of when you're talking to him, that it you want it to be the first time. I want to make sure I'm ready to record and all that stuff and have all the right questions. So but yeah, it started, this is like back in March of 2022 when I first made the first phone call, and then to my dad. So
yeah.
it's like I think maybe the first recording was probably like maybe February of 2022.
You
So when you like came up with the idea, how long between like coming up with the idea to like seriously pursuing doing it lapsed?
So I wrote an article in 2020 about like the sports scams and stuff. So that got like a decent buzz. And then I then followed up with like with a manager actually followed up with me to see if he'd be like, "Oh, would you be interested in ever doing this as a podcast?" And I thought about it, more so after he said it. I wanted to do it. I wanted to do the story as like a TV show or as a film or something. And that was always my goal. And a podcast just seemed like so much work and not really the medium that I wanted. But then as time went on, I was like, all right, let me like reach back out to this guy. And then he set me up with a production company and had a few meetings and everything. And then from there, things kind of just like got going. But the idea of like what would happen in the podcast and kind of I mean, I know, I mean, even though I haven't talked to my father in a while, I had an idea that the way that it was going to play out, it was going to play out this way. So when I pitched it, I was like, oh, they wanted 10 episodes, and I was like, this is how I would see the 10 episodes playing. And some things changed, of course, but for the most part, the idea that I was like, oh, I was going to be able to get my father on, and like, these people are going to have these stories, and I was going to be able to get these stories out of these people. That all like actually came out. So I was very fortunate that it played out the way that I thought it would.
was it just the idea of, I guess, like cracking into this Pandora's box with how it affects all of the relationships kind of in your orbit. And I guess the question I've kind of been wondering is like, did you want to do this for yourself, or is a lot of it the interest that other people have in it?
Yeah, well, I didn't think that. I mean, I was hoping that people would be interested in it, but yeah, I mean, partly I was going into it where well, here's the thing, would I do it if I wasn't doing it for entertainment also?
Yeah.
That's a tough question to ask because I was like, oh, I have this space where I could do this thing that would have been on the back of my mind of doing, but now I could do it and like do it publicly. Kind of
Mhm.
gave me a little bit more of a I don't know, I guess a better feel for doing it, even though it's like it's being recorded and everything. So I think that just going through the whole process, I just kind of looked at it like this could be a good chance, just even though it's entertainment, it would be a good chance for me to like kind of get the things out that I wanted to say, and maybe I wasn't going to be able to say it without having a podcast.
Yeah, and
Mm.
I also feel like that just lends to what you do. I mean, like, I don't know, just
Yeah.
like like a kind of like crafting a narrative, telling a story. Um, One of the things that I've like thought about so much over because uh when I think about like the con man, like the idea of a con man, it it's so romanticized and
Yeah.
like it's so sexy. It's like Danny Ocean, The Sting, like like America's hottest men have been con men, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
like the truth of it is because like I have crossed paths with people like that, and you immediately realize you're like, oh, like this isn't romantic at all. This
Right.
is. And
Yes.
so when you were growing up around it, like what was there like a roller coaster of opinion, like of how you felt about it, or was it always, was there a monotone feeling of I don't know. Does that
Um,
make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's definitely romanticized in like, media and everything, or just how somebody looks. Oh, like that's so cool. Your dad got you into sporting events, but it's like that. Well, to be that person, at least especially in his case, he's that person in everyday life. So you get pretty tired of it,
Yeah.
and you don't want to be around that person. And yeah, people get hurt while you're actually going through like
Mhm.
dealing with this person because everything that he would say to me, you kind of like took it like with a grain of salt. You couldn't really take him at his word for anything.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. And that's like your dad. It's everything you want your dad to be. And you look at it as I got older, I was like, I wish my dad was a good role model. I wish he didn't have, disagreements with people over something that seemed so trivial. But to him, he felt that he always wanted to get ahead, always get one over on somebody. And he didn't care about jeopardizing relationships, whether it was, with a business that he was in that could have very well been legit, but he chose not to, or if it involves even screwing over family members.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a tough thing to when you see
Well,
of like what a con man is. It's not at least definitely in my case it's not never going to be great. It's not like, oh, the guy's job is, oh, I lie to people and then I come home and then I'm like this great person.
yeah. Yeah.
How
It's, go ahead, Cassandra.
I was just wondering, you're a comedian by profession. How hard was it for you not to rely on like your comedy to kind of break the tension? Because you remained so vulnerable and honest and earnest throughout the whole piece. And like there was laughable moments, of course, but even when you're talking to
Yeah.
your friends that are famous comedians, it was still a very like vulnerable conversation. So how hard was that for you?
Yeah, hard because in general, I don't really take things that serious. But I felt like the tone for the show, it's kind of like a dark, or like it's called a show, the podcast. But like even when if I was to turn it into a show, it's to make it a kind of a dark comedy. So yeah, they'll
Yeah.
have like light-hearted moments that could be fun or funny, but for the most part, it's not a funny story. So you kind of just go through with it like you wouldn't like, or as I would say, a non-comedian would go through it in regular life. You just go through it, and then you kind of, like, I mean, stuff happened with my dog, my childhood dog, which was like tough,
Hmm.
and I wanted to go through that with like kind of a feeling of, oh, I'm going through my house and then I see the dog's like old like teeth marks on like a gate. And I'm like, oh, that I wanted to bring that out as much as I could to other people, to a listener too, that you can't visualize it too. That's what's hard too. I'm trying to say my thoughts and my feelings, and it's something that I haven't really ever done before. So, therapeutically, that was definitely a thing that I didn't realize would be so helpful. Even just like saying it, and I would have to hear the podcast over and over again as I was sat through editing. And a lot of times it would be hard, but you go through it a lot and you're kind of getting that, I guess that therapy that you maybe needed over time and you didn't expect to get like this late, I guess, in my life, or that I still needed, but going through the podcast, it kind of helped it.
I'm
Wow.
so glad you kept that all in, but I know that that must have been really hard.
Yeah, and also, trying to be like, oh, do I really want to say what I'm feeling? You are very vulnerable in these situations. So do I want to say exactly how I'm feeling? Am I mentioning, to me, my dog was a huge deal for me because when my parents divorced, my dad, he got my dog, and I never got my dog again. So I was like, oh, like, do I, am I going to sound like a pussy just by saying, like, mentioning my childhood dog over and over again?
Right.
But people really relate to it, and
Oh,
so,
totally.
It's
I was like,
devastating.
yeah, it's devastating. So I'm like, and it's the least I could do for my dog. I was like, what's the best
Mhm.
tribute I could do? Is like, oh, at least I have like people that know that he existed, and giving him like a way of like, oh, like this is a important piece of me. So and that was something I was like, oh, let me just share it. And it really, what I guess it also taught me, and just in terms of like the creative process, was being, and I'm sure it stays true to art also, is really saying the truth, like, and I mean, if I say it the way it is, that's the easiest way to write, or easiest way to create. And my stand up, as time has gone on, has become more real, where I mean, there's obviously a joke at the end, but the beginning
Mhm.
part, for the most part, is true. And
Right.
then you could write the punchline. And in this, it was like, let me just say the truth and then
Yeah.
feel that out. And then luckily enough, there's so much story here that I was able to make it into something that's entertaining, or a little bit like getting people to have emotion towards my story, because a lot of people relate their own story to my own story. They'll say that, their dad was screwed up, or parent, or they cut off a sibling, or something over time. So they really connect with these with the story and everything.
Think it also really speaks of the age that like your parents divorced. Like the fact that the dog was so important. Like I think of that age and like my dog was my best friend. Like that was implicit to my day and every interaction. So the fact that it affected you that much really spoke to how real it was.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, and yeah, it just goes, across the board. If I'm having a conversation with a friend, even a comic, you want it to be funny, and like they'll be themselves, but I have to play this kind of my part of, I'm on the goal of learning from them and like giving them the information of what happened. Like I'm trying to catch them up on where I'm at in the podcast in like real time, and trying to
Hmm.
have that as real of a conversation as you could possibly have. And then go on with the goal of tracking him down, learning more. Because the part of having comics in the show itself, it was to lighten things up slightly. So you're just trying to give some of that, just like at least comedic level to it. But it's hard because it is obviously there's a seriousness to it, but I think it gives it a little bit more lighthearted of
There,
a feel.
there's such a wealth of comedians with really bad dads, but I feel
Yeah,
like you have like the royal flush of
I got
like,
lucky.
yeah, you have like the best.
Yeah.
I mean, but like it was interesting because like the episode where you're talking with Sam Morril, like, and he's like, I didn't know this was your story at all. So you like kept that pretty tight for like a long time.
Yeah, I kept it tight. Well, also it's hard. Yeah, listen. So this is 10 episodes. So, and obviously, some of it is in present day, but Yeah, I kept a lot because there's so much story to tell. And it's also
Yeah.
sounds a lot of it's almost sounds unbelievable. And you can't
Oh, I
tell.
meant like, oh, sorry. No, no, no. I meant like you're just like you didn't tell a lot of people about
Oh
it.
yeah, like no, well, I didn't tell anybody like the back. Yeah, a big deep
Yeah.
like story of yeah. They
Yeah.
didn't know all the background. They didn't know how serious it was with my parents, how manipulative my dad was. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's a lot of stuff that I didn't share. You
Also,
most
like the second you tell the story, someone's like, wait a second, you got to meet Michael Jordan.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
did
yeah,
that, or
right.
did you get sick of that? Like, yeah, I mean,
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
know.
totally. Well, yeah, and you get comments like, "Oh, your dad doesn't seem that bad," and you're the
Yeah.
only way to describe it is by giving a full-on story and giving,
Which
giving
is
all the
exhausting.
background.
Yeah.
Yeah, so which is why part of, the podcast, why it starts with the story of, being a Sports Illustrated for Kids reporter, and my dad coming up with that idea, that con was because it was lighthearted and it seemed, to obviously it benefited me and it seemed like,
Mhm.
oh, this is a dad who couldn't take his kid to a game and he found a way to do it. But then it's like there's so much other stuff that's there. And so I start with
Yeah.
that.
When you were doing that, were you nervous at all as a kid? Or did you just like was your dad so good at it there was just complete trust?
Well, it's
Not
complete, yeah.
trust, but like,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I completely, yeah, I didn't think anything bad was going to happen because I figured that he could just, what he says is good and he's going to be
Mhm.
able to figure out a way of how to get us
Yeah.
in and we're not going to deal with any problems. And if there is a problem, he'll figure a way out of that. But yeah, so I didn't have any, I wasn't really, really worried about anything happening but, there are times where I was thinking like, are we not going to get in the locker room this time? And that never happened. We got in every single time. So, you
Yeah.
build up this like kind of I guess shield that you're like that, oh, nothing could happen because he's kind of seems invincible in these circumstances. But
Yeah.
as time got on, you realize like, oh, not everybody buys this bullshit. There are a bunch of people who didn't, or they be and you're around, and then you as a kid you don't pick up on that in the beginning because you're so
Mhm.
young. But then you're seeing how other people are reacting or they're yelling at him, and you're like, that you start picking up on, oh, there's another person yelling at him for
Mhm.
something. So people catch
Yeah.
on. And a con
Yeah.
man doesn't need to con everybody. He just needs to
Yeah.
con a good number of people. Like, and that's
Yeah.
it. You get a small group and then on to the next group. And then
So,
so
yeah.
it's strength by numbers.
Was he does he have like it's kind of interesting like because there's such a fascination with celebrity. Like it didn't seem like there was a consistency to like the opportunities that were made available to you and that like many of them were well, I guess they were all obviously all sports, but it was just like all across the board. Nancy Kerrigan,
Yeah, yeah.
just like all. Was it really? Do you think that the motivation to get into these games is just to see if you could do it,
Uh,
or
Partly,
was there?
I think he really enjoyed the con. So he enjoyed it so much that he liked also, I think, being around these people. So he's
Yeah.
somebody who he didn't have the skills to be a photographer, a great photographer, but he
Yeah.
had the skills to lie and sit next to them and take pictures with them on the floor at Madison Square Garden. So he figured out a way that he wasn't with New York Times taking pictures, but he was with the guy who was taking pictures for the New York Times
Mhm.
while he sat next to him taking like he found the way. So he's like, "Oh, you went to school for photography? I'm here too." I think that
Mhm.
kind of stuff is what he liked. And in terms of celebrities and rubbing elbows with these people, that was definitely, he could have seen that, and I'm surprisingly he didn't see that as an opportunity for us to push ahead and be in like their circle somehow. But
Right.
I what a lot of times he would show the pictures that we had. I wasn't allowed to tell people about the scam, but he would share and be like, look who my son met. So in his
Yeah.
business, so he made himself seem more important than it was, so he would use that in his own regular life. And one of the things that I always wondered was, it's like my dad, here he is, he came up with this Sports Illustrated for Kids scam of us going to the games, but very well, this is the same person who could have just called up Sports Illustrated for Kids and said that, hey, I'm a photographer. My kid and I would love to try a piece in the
He could have
magazine.
done it.
They would have bought that. That
That's
would have
such a
been,
good point.
yeah. It was like, that seems a lot easier. And
Yeah.
back, because I mean,
Yeah.
how many people were calling to do that? Then maybe go to the scam after that. But
Yeah.
you could have set it up where it's like, oh, I'm actually in the magazine, like legit.
I mean, it is interesting though, because like you were so young, you met so many. I mean, but at the age of 20, I had never ever crossed paths with any famous person ever. I would have been weird, it would have been this like bizarre experience for me. And
Yeah,
so, and I built like everybody, we built this idea of like celebrity in our head or status or whatever. And I feel like you had this like very strange exposure to it. Where did it like lead to disinterest or or more reverence for like fame? Because I mean, you are a
yeah.
successful
I
comedian,
was
but
able to
like,
get you know what it taught me is that oh, you could be around these people, like these athletes and stuff, or you could be around a celebrity, um, if you work hard the right way too. So I saw all the effort that my dad put into his lives, and back to that, the thing like, oh, you could have called Sports Illustrated and got us in actually, but it's so all the effort that he put into the scam really could have been used, or like I'm going to be a photographer. All this effort that he's saying that he is this stuff, like that could have been used for actual good. So what it taught me was, all right, if I work hard, I could get this stuff. Then on the same level, because I was able to meet these people at a young age, it taught me like, oh, it's not that big of a deal meeting somebody that's a
Mhm.
celebrity, even though they seem so far away, they are reachable. And I had a big gap from when I was a kid to then when I've been actually in front of people that have fame. So it took like a little bit of time, but in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, I've been prepared for this before. So you
Mhm.
kind of know like, oh, I'm ready for this. Or, I did my first TV appearance was on Conan. I was like, I am ready for this because I who else I had this past in my
Yeah.
life where I was a reporter that kind of helped me of like just mentally being like, I could do this. I've done other things, that are crazy too.
Yeah. Whereas like if you had Conjure on, it'd be insane.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like I'm assuming like during your young adulthood, like you had to have at some point come to a crossroads where there was like the way your dad would solve the problem and like you solve the problem. And
Yeah.
was there's just so much opposition? Like there you were so aware of that? Have you always
Yeah.
taken that like the Gary route, or were there
No,
temptations?
not at
Were
all.
there?
I was
That sounds like devil angel, but like that's not what I mean. I just mean I don't know. Like it's just interesting that you've gone into a career that like many people. I don't know how often like your regular person understands this, but like many comedians completely make up their story. Like it's just false
yeah.
stories.
Yeah, you're around a group of people that are constantly either boasting about themselves or trying
Yeah.
to
And
guess
so like yeah, I
hype.
guess so like how did it affect like honesty in your life and in your comedy?
Yeah, well, I mean, just in my life, regular life, it took a while because I mean, I was taught all the wrong skills by the person that's supposed to be my number one
Yeah.
role model, my dad. So learning all these things and
Mhm.
seeing he's showing me in his way. I mean, I stopped talking to him when I was 15. So up until then, everything that he showed me was this is how life works.
Mhm.
And I assumed that was pretty much for the most part, that's how life works. And I grew up as time, I'm a, teenager. Teenagers always you're always, most of the time you're getting in trouble. So I was doing, messed up stuff, like wherever it may be, drugs were like selling drugs and things because I would be like, I could get away with this because
Mhm.
I have a I have this idea of my dad. I saw him get away with stuff. I could get away with it too, in my own way. We're still, cheating on exams or like
Mhm.
just the way I would he didn't treat my mom great, just just not being a great overall person. But I was taught a wrong model, and but as I got older, I was like, I feel like you become a point where you're like, I don't want to be my dad, and that's your
Mhm.
number one fear. And
Yeah.
so that started like really catching up to me, and I was like, I need to focus on growing into the best person I could be, and go to therapy and you talk it out more, and uh then you're like, oh, therapy that sucks, and then get a new therapist, and then you go through the whole process, but you become more self-aware. And then I started doing stand-up too, and stand-up in one way helps because it makes you a little bit more self-aware. You have to be vulnerable on stage, and I don't, I'm not like telling, complete truth up on stage, but you tell more and you put yourself in these situations and you start doing what you want. And then, I met my wife, and then, she's a great person. So you learn from these situations that you have to put it yourself in. And
Yeah.
I don't want to repeat the same mistakes my dad did in his marriage. But yeah, all that stuff.
You touched on like truth and art and like telling the story and just being honest as possible and not like leaning on, like just like leaning on getting a laugh from
Mhm.
like neighbor Gatsby or something. I don't know. But
Mhm.
we like so with our school and like what we talk about here a lot, we often talk about like developing your voice as an artist. I think
Yeah,
like
makes sense.
every artist kind of has to go into that.
Right.
I feel like it's really fun checking out a comedian's work from like their first late night to like their most recent special, because it's you really get to see that like I don't know, that like that transition or that change.
Yeah.
What were some of the like, I guess, what were some of the things you had to do to, I guess, crack into that personal voice
Yeah.
that you landed on, that's like I honestly think is like pretty brilliant and unique. Yeah.
Thanks. I would say you're just doing it over time. You try and feel what's like the most comfortable to you. So
Mhm.
and I remember when I first started, very vividly, maybe it was like 6 months in, and comedy's just like every creative form. It's super hard,
Mhm.
and you could be a great artist, but that's good, and that's good. But you're not. Everything takes time. It takes time to develop. You're always developing your skills. But when you start comedy, you really are. When you're 6 months, I was 6 months in, and you feel like you're 6 months old. So it is equivalent of of a baby. But I would go on stage in front of like five, six people, and you're learning to talk in front of, in a microphone. You're learning to tell your jokes. But I remember not feeling like I was telling the jokes that I wanted to tell. Whether it's and more so in the style, like either they would be too long, and I'm not, and I would feel like I'm not a storyteller. I feel, and then I started developing into like more of like a short joke style, because if you tell a short joke, you find out if you get a laugh as fast as possible. And a lot of times these places that I'd be performing at, you're not going to get more than 5 to 7 minutes.
Mhm.
So you try and compact as many short jokes in these 5 to 7 minutes. And that kind of just helped me develop into like the style. And also I just felt most comfortable talking into a microphone, telling a joke like every 10 to 15 seconds. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of how it developed. But over time, I just became more comfortable where, oh, I'd be telling this one joke, and I'm like, I had this other joke that I thought of like 6 months before that. And now they could kind of go together. And now it seems like it's one thing. So, and
Yeah.
then you're like, now let me just say them together. And then now it seems like I have a little bit of a longer joke. So your style develops into like trusting yourself more. And you're like, oh, even though I tried this thing that didn't work, but now, and it works with art too. Like, oh, I tried this, I know nothing about art, but if I tried, drawing, it would be like I tried drawing this thing, and I couldn't make, a
Yeah.
circle, but let me try again. Now I make the perfect circle. That's like a joke. Oh, I had a joke on,
Right.
whatever, cars, and it wasn't working, but then you try it, a year later, and now it does work because you're just better, or you just finally figure out the right way to say it.
It's just time in the game versus timing it. It's
Yeah.
just being in it long enough, I guess. Yeah, like letting things kind of ferment too.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't, everyone deals with this, but a lot of people know uh don't care for creative stuff, only because they're not creative a lot of times themselves. So
Mhm.
we're very easily criticized for what we do. So, be like, oh, I don't see that, that's not like, it's like, I see that it's a nice, painting, but it's like, what do you sometimes it's never anything good. Like somebody's feedback, you kind of just have to be trusting in yourself. Like obviously we could get, as a comic, we get laughs. You want to make sure you're getting the right laughs on stuff too. Like you're not getting cheap laughs, because you can get cheap laughs if you curse sometimes. But you try and do it as like true to yourself. So am I doing the things that I really find funny? And that's like where I think maybe over time I really developed of caring more about like, oh, this gets a laugh, but it's not really, I don't really want to say that. So now I'm like, I trust more. I'm like, oh, I find this funny. And it just feels like it's better comedy that way.
I feel like there's so many visual artists that would totally identify with that. Like
Yeah, yeah.
finding like being like, I know I can have success if I make paintings like this, but I don't want to make that painting.
Oh,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could, yeah, it totally
Yeah.
connects with that.
And I know that there's definitely cheap laughs in the painting world,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's super interesting. Like, I guess I know you got to go soon, but I guess one of the last questions I was going to ask is like, what do you think? What is your biggest fear from making this, and what are you hoping to gain from it? This podcast.
Yeah. So biggest fear would probably be that I get sued by my dad. And then
Which is a legit fear based on what
Yeah.
you've revealed so
yeah.
far.
Right. So I get sued by him, and nothing like comes of the podcast, and he kind of just like, make my world like just a living hell. But so that would probably be the number one fear. But yeah, I really want I mean, it's like a story that just has so many different twists and turns, and it's like a father who's a con man, and then he has has these inner like workings with the mob and like drug
Yeah.
deal. Like he's got so many different connections over time, and like the scams that he's run, and these are the stories that I've been able to find out. Like these are the ones that I've been like I found out through talking to people, or that that maybe
Yeah.
that like he told me. So the goal would be like, oh, if I could turn it into, yeah, show or a movie, because that's every comics or I think creative person, like TV or whatever
Yeah.
field, like they just want to have more people see what they're doing.
Yeah. Gary, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I
Thank you,
really
guys.
appreciate it. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I
Yeah, I'd
can't
love
wait for the next 2 episodes.
thank you so much. Yeah, I'd love to see like the pieces that everybody like comes up with. I mean, the things
Yeah,
like are
they should be
awesome.
Yeah,
posting
sorry I haven't
tonight.
painted you yet. I'm still trying to figure out how Michael Jordan looks.
Yeah, no, that looks great. I
Yeah.
love it. But
Gary, the thumb next to it. Yeah.
yeah, no, this is super cool, and I appreciate you guys asking me, and yeah, I hope I gave a good talk and everything, and
Yeah. You did
Loved
awesome.
it.
Yeah,
Loved
definitely.
it so
Thank you so
much.
much. Really
some
appreciate you
people.
Absolutely
being here.
excellent, Gary. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I know some people have questions, so I don't want to go. Could everybody see the questions that are up there, or no? Or is it just
Um,
me?
maybe
I
just
don't.
you. I don't see any questions.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, oh yeah, it's more so. Oh wait, would have loved. What's the
Oh,
K?
we did a dog episode last week. So seen you
Oh,
see
I would have loved the K9. Oh, the K9 Hive. Oh, that's
Yeah.
thank you. Want me to cry right now?
Oh,
Yeah.
I do want to ask. I was so like entertained, but also just loved her advice for you. Like, how hard was it to get your therapist on to like
So
be
hard. Oh
because
my
I feel
God.
like there's got to be a lot of hoops she's got to jump through, even with permission from
Yeah.
you, to talk about what you're going through.
Totally. And she was like a wall. I had to send her after every recording. She was like, "Oh, can you send me that?" And luckily, like everything I had in, she was like, "Oh no, you could keep everything. You could keep it." Like she wanted to make sure that she wasn't going to look bad. But everything was just like such a therapeutic, like straight response. And she was great. And she was also my
Yeah.
marriage counselor too.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And I love that whole process. Like your wife, I loved her too because
Yeah.
Yeah.
she keeps you on the straight and narrow, and
Oh,
like
totally.
she
Yeah.
seems really good for
Yeah.
you. But I was
My
entertained very much by often your therapist's advice when you were running headlong into something.
Yeah. No, my wife is great. Like she doesn't take shit. So
Yeah.
and then I'm like, all right, I just got to deal with it. But yeah, my therapist, she's great on it, and I appreciate that she was doing it. But some people get tight because you're being recorded, and
Hmm.
obviously she's giving basically job, like this is her job, and so you're getting to see her at work, so it's a very tense thing. But yeah, she was great, and the whole goal is that everybody could like move this. I'm trying to tell a story, so you're trying to move it along. Where I'm like,
Mhm.
all right, I tell her, oh, this is what happened, and you're hoping you're gonna get like these bits from them that are gonna be usable because every episode is for the most part 30 minutes. Some are a little bit shorter, some are gonna be longer, but the whole thing, like if I was going through a recording, if I'm talking to my wife, it's like probably an hour recording that is whittled down to like 5 minutes or whatever, or
Oh
the
my
therapy
gosh.
like 3 minutes that you wind up using for that, a particular episode, and that was an hour session or whatever, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So you just go through it and you're like, that's the hard part. But yeah, but I mean, I'm happy with how the podcast came out, and I think, and again, it goes back to, it kind of started like over 2.5 years ago, that I feel like good things just take time. So the more,
Mhm.
if you're working on something, obviously, if you have deadlines, you got to do what you got to do, but sometimes you just got to just keep on, going with something, and maybe you have a long project and you still work on other stuff, but this long project, the one that means so much to you, might just take more time, and that's okay.
How old is your son now?
So actually, I have two kids now.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
that's how long this podcast has been going
Yeah,
on.
because
But
I
yeah,
was like, he was just kind of babbling and saying like little things
yeah.
at that time.
But he just turned 4. So
Oh,
that one turned 4, and then I have another one that's 19 months.
Wow.
well, that is delightful chaos.
Yeah, no, it's wild. Yeah. So, but yeah, it teaches you a lot. And I think, being a parent is great, and it kind of lights a fire under you to make sure you get stuff done. The question also was like, would I do this if I wasn't a father? And
Hmm.
probably not. It was just kind of these perfect things that aligned where, oh, I'm a dad now. And also The Last Dance, the documentary came out.
I
It's kind
love that
of,
documentary so
yeah,
much.
it's amazing. And I was like, oh, most of the stuff that comedians do is like, we'll post things on, online because we're bragging. We're bragging about like, so I was like, oh, The Last Dance, this is my opportunity to be like, I did this thing with, and so I post that's kind of what generated it before the Sports Illustrated article was, I'm going to post about my experience with Michael
Mhm.
Jordan in a different way.
You didn't start, have you heard from like any of the celebrities you posed with as a kid because this has come out? Like, have you heard from Nancy Kerrigan or Michael Jordan or anybody?
No, yeah, Michael Jordan is actually back here. I just introduced him. No, but the basement. But I didn't hear from anyone. But I wouldn't be surprised if I do eventually. But I mean, I feel like getting in there a lot of times some of these celebrities are so secluded. Like Cindy Crawford, I wonder how much like anything information even gets to her anymore. They
Hmm.
a lot of them probably live in a pretty secluded
Like a
bubble.
bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Gary, this is awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks again,
It was
guys.
amazing. Love your comedy, love the podcast. And
I appreciate it.
yeah, I hope
Yeah,
you
stay tuned.
check out Ryan's art.
Episode on Monday is I interview my dad, so you get a lot of the answers to questions that you might have had previously from like all like my interviews with different
Mhm.
family members and
Ooh,
my coworkers. So yeah,
exciting.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
So get there, but cool guys.
Amazing. Awesome. Thanks, Gary.
I'll
Thank you,
talk.
Thank you so
Gary.
much.
You're welcome.